Good morning, 5th grade. This is the last 5th grade science video of the year. You guys happy about that? I am. I'm sure you guys are too. I miss seeing you guys face to face. So we're going to finish up our lessons on what our responsibility is when it comes to the earth. And yesterday we learned about some responsibilities that we could have and how habitat destruction is the #1 cause of stress on this earth. So we're going to look at a couple more, and then we're also going to look at an example of how our decisions have negatively impacted an ecosystem. All right, so we know that there are some things that we do that can cause some issues. Another example is excessive hunting and fishing. This can be a problem, and we have laws today that actually control our fishing and hunting. These laws try to help keep the animal populations in an ecosystem balanced. We don't want too many of a certain kind of species in a certain area. Remember, we talked about that could cause some issues. So let me give you an example. These cute little fellows right here, these are called Atlantic puffins. And hundreds of years ago, there were so many Atlantic puffins that lived in North America. Do you know that we had these living in North America? By the early 1900s, though, the number had decreased greatly. Why? Because a lot of them died because of excessive hunting and habitat loss. People would see these little things, they would shoot them, they would kill them, they would eat them, or they would stuff them as like ornaments to put in their house. Another thing is the habitat loss. You think about what was going on in the early 1900s, that was a huge industrial boom in in North America. A lot of new cities were like really starting to grow, so a lot of their area was taken away, which led to a lot of them dying. Today, because of laws protecting them, the number of puffins in North America is starting to increase again. Yay! Now, plants and animal species that originally lived in an ecosystem, we know that those are called native species. They're supposed to be here. But we have species that are not native to an area and they can cause harm. We call those invasive species. Now, we have several here in Florida. You guys know the Jesus lizards, those things are invasive. The pythons that we have in the Everglades, those are invasive. You learned at Grassy Waters that we saw those little pink snail eggs. Those giant snails are invasive, and usually what happens is our iguanas. You guys see the iguanas; those are invasive as well. What happens is people will get those things as pets. They get too big. They release them in the wild thinking they're just going to die, but somehow they survive, and they take over. Well, what is the problem with that? The problem is the fact that they eat things that our native species depend on. So let's look at an example of that. Introducing a new species into an ecosystem will usually bring problems, like people who have brought in these pythons in the Florida Everglades. Those are not good. These zebra mussels in the Great Lakes, these things are nasty. They grow and reproduce like crazy, and they just devour anything that's alive, plant-wise, in lakes. Here's an example of this. Years ago, ships accidentally brought rats to Hawaii. Hawaii did not have rats. Didn't have them. But when it started becoming popular, people discovering, hey, there's this stop in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that we could refuel, replenish our supplies, and then keep going, rats that were on the ship were introduced to the islands of Hawaii. The rats were an invasive species, and they preyed on the eggs of a bird that we call the nene. This is a Hawaiian goose. So to control the rat population, what did the smart people do? These are nene, by the way. The smart people said, well, there's something invasive, so let's bring in another creature that's invasive to take care of these animals, because we know that the mongoose, which is a member of the weasel family, the mongoose likes to eat rats where they normally live. So let's bring it to Hawaii so they can take care of the rat population. Well, what they failed to even realize is that mongoose did not eat the rats. Instead, they also liked the nene eggs. The introduction of a non-native species now made this problem worse. So now the island of Hawaii not only has rats, but it also has mongoose. So besides preying on native species, why are invasive species not good? Well, they can also bring other problems. Sometimes native species die from diseases brought in by new species. And a lot of times invasive species also have no natural predator in that new habitat. We've talked about the lionfish before. The lionfish have no predator, but they are all over the place in our oceans, especially off the coast of Florida. They weren't always here, but they were released, and now they breed like crazy. They don't eat one specific thing, they'll eat anything, and there's no predator, so now they're just taking over. This allows the population of invasive species to grow rapidly, kind of like the pythons we have in the Everglades and the Jesus lizards and the iguanas and all those species that we have here. When there's more species, there's more competition for the same resources like food and water, and native populations usually suffer because of this. Here's another example. At one time, huge flocks of what we call passenger pigeons, this is a passenger pigeon, they used to fill the North American skies, but the last known passenger pigeon died in captivity in 1914. Most of these birds died from hunting. Actually, a lot of people would eat these for food. The species is now considered extinct, and we know that extinct means when the last known member of that species dies. A species becomes endangered when its population is so small that the species could become extinct. All of these creatures right here were at one point endangered. Hunting, loss of habitat, our carelessness often are the reason that these species become endangered. But usually it's this right here, the loss of a habitat. So we also have what's called threatened, and this is when the population could become endangered in the future. And a species that can live in only one habitat is in more danger of becoming threatened, endangered, or eventually extinct than a species that can live in different areas. So next week on Tuesday, we're doing some fun things. Tuesday is Endangered Species Day. So we're going to be doing something that has to do with endangered species, just for fun. But for today, for your last science project, we're going to make this a difficult one. All you need to do is comment that you saw the video. All right, guys. I love you. Bye.